Can we talk about Wrecker about to get Mufasa'd?
Dude, I know. That's I posted that on Twitter, and I just posted the GIF of Simba during the stampede. I'm like, as soon as I saw the deer, I'm like, holy, we're gonna get a Mufasa. Someone's getting trampled to
Yeah,
death right
he's gonna
now.
get Mufasa'd. Do not Mufasa, Wrecker.
The Force is what gives the Jedi his power.
Why is the Force connecting us?
I'm a Jedi.
Always do. There are. We're a dyad in the Force.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the Force Diet Podcast. This is episode 46. Tonight we're going to be talking about episode 9 of the Bad Batch, The Crossing, as well as a few noteworthy news nuggets, including news of a new Star Wars film being announced at this year's Star Wars Celebration, and the final trailer for Mando Season 3 dropped, gearing us up for what's to come in the next few weeks. I'm your host, Obi Sean, joined as always by my best bud, Johnny John. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. Finally got through the intro. It only took 3 tries.
Truly, how many different alliterations did you have to use during that same intro?
I think I said new 5 times there, so that was good. I didn't.
New news nuggets. Yeah, you really were rolling on it. I'm like, man, he is crushing the. Never mind. I'm not going to say it.
My
Never mind.
12th
Yep,
my
I'm not
12th
gonna
grade
say
lit,
that.
my 12th grade lit teacher would be so proud.
Get a thesaurus, dude. Get a thesaurus. Yeah, good stuff. I mean, we had a we'll call it a fun brain break episode, and yeah, we got some cool news in the Star Wars universe. I know we talked about it briefly in our yearly recap just a couple weeks ago. That is something we were missing. That was a letdown, and so hopefully we get some better news this year about the silver the movie theaters aspect of Star Wars. So
The silver screen.
the silver screen, yeah.
There it is. So yeah, episode 9, the crossing, right? May as well have been called Crossroads, because after the events of 7 and 8, and with Echo leaving, the Bad Batch is definitely at a crossroads as far as where they go as a team. I think it's something that we've kind of been expecting, given how things have progressed throughout the season, and things are starting to come to a head. There's some peril that we'll talk about briefly here in a second, but the big takeaway is the relationship between Omega and Tech, and kind of the deeper message in how different people process emotions differently, and how someone like Tech, for example, who is completely logical and rational and everything like that, versus Omega, who is more emotional, especially as a child, how those two have to interact, and how he learns to relate to her. So yeah, the overall episode, they're trying to get some Ipsium for Sid. Wrecker's put on lookout, and a Hondo Onaka wannabe ends up sniping the Marauder. I did think
Truly.
it was going to be Hondo. I was hoping it was going to be Hondo. Right. So their ship gets stolen. Tech is very matter of fact in who he blames, and gets snippy with Wrecker. They kind of get snippy with each other, and they of course have to then trek to a settlement. On the way, they have a Lion King moment, and I totally thought Wrecker was going to get Mufasa'd.
He was gonna go. I mean, as soon as I saw it happen, I'm like, last guy up the rope is gonna get taken off the rope.
Yeah, and the second I saw the deer running,
It would have improved the episode. That's all I'm saying. It would have improved the episode.
Well, and I love Tech just
I don't
hanging.
care what you say. It would have improved it.
It would have been, well,
More
there
tears,
would have been
but,
tears. There would have been tears. The fact that he goes and just lays on top of the Ipsium, so that I guess, if it blows up, he's the only one that gets blown up. I understand the rationale behind it, but frankly, it wouldn't have made a difference, despite what Tech said. Yeah. So after that, they end up in a different mine, and Omega is still taking the departure of Echo really hard. Tech doesn't really know how to relate to that or empathize with her, so she takes off, finds herself her own Ipsium ore vein, one that is clearly better than the one that Sid had originally procured. And
she's just not very good at those deals. So
no, yeah, it's not very surprising at this point, given how terrible
there's
she is.
there's not a lot of inspection of the expectation. I mean, just takes everybody else at their word, even though nobody takes her at hers. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, no. So the cave. The cave's collapsed in, right, and they're trying to dig themselves out. So they send Tech to find her and talk to her. Hunter is, he's like, you idiot. She's clearly upset, and you don't know how to relate to children. So go figure it out. And so yeah, he finds her.
Gives him the maybe go see her.
Because even Wrecker is better at relating to the emotions of a child than Tech is. So he finds her. She ends up, falling down into this aqueduct, and without hesitation, Tech jumps after her, which I think says a lot, and we'll talk about it in a little bit. But they end up, flying down this aqueduct to this in this quarry, and then they have the big kind of moment between the two of them. And then, they're able to blow their way out with all of the Ipsium that Omega has found. And the last little bit, they, in order to try and escape, they call Sid, who is rather reluctant to assist at first and may or may not have been persuaded to help at the end. So
They get the gentle reminder that we've bailed you out like 3 times in a row now. So
yeah,
figure it out.
Thank you for the reminder, Goggles. I love that she calls him Goggles.
Oh yeah, she was not happy about that. That's for sure. Yeah, I think this episode really, highlighted Tech again, which is, we've been getting him a lot this season. I'm telling you right now, I got a bad feeling about Tech.
Swear to God, they better not touch him.
You'd be so devastated. You would be so devastated. But this is another episode where it really highlights his growth as a character. And you said it best. Like Hunter basically, yeah, you idiot. Like, go, you messed up. You done messed up, Ron. Like, go fix it. Go fix it right now. But that's just it. Like, Tech doesn't understand nor believe that he has done anything wrong, and he points out that fact multiple times. Like, I was just stating the fact, and Hunter gave him the best line that you could give. She knows what the truth is. That's the problem. The problem is that's the reality of what's going on, and you don't know why that's a problem, which is the problem. So it was. Overall, as far as the emotional growth in the episode, I you see it from both, especially Omega and Tech, but you also see the team, adjusting to not having that extra pair of hands that they rely on. They're down one guy, pre or post Echo. Echo joining the team in Clone Wars Season 7 was a bonus for them. And then they lost Crosshair, so they were like, we're still good. Squad of 4, we got this. This is what we are this is normal for us. But now they're down to 3 plus Omega, and it changes not just the skill set, but the strength of the team. So you see them going through those adjustments, and then they still don't trust Omega to be alone somewhere, and also Omega's not as much help as they need inside the tunnel until they realize that they need her size to get into small crevices. So go figure. She's really good for thieving, as Star-Lord would say.
Yeah.
She's small. She can get into tiny areas real easily.
Exactly.
You're welcome, Marvel fans. Um, but yeah, overall in the episode, I mean, you see Tech and you know he struggles with these things already. Like we already know that Tech is not the guy to bring emotion into the game because he's completely logic all day, all like 24/7. So watching him realize that like I still feel things about what's happened, but my brain just doesn't. It's just not how it hits me. So, super strong message for a lot of people out there. Not just. I think most of people would probably go towards men and women in this situation, right? Like men process loss and everything else very differently than women do, but also people with, if they're on and not to be too crazy, but like on the spectrum in some kind of way, right? Like you're not going to process things the exact same way as somebody else. Like having empathy is really tough for some people, and that's okay. And Tech is one of the like. I mean, if you met Tech on the street and he was bringing up all these logic items, you'd be like, all right, you're not going to get anything emotional I'm saying. So I'm going to make sure it's straight facts all the time. And I allow you to process things because you're just not going to process it how I do. But he did notice at the end of the episode, like he saw the effect that losing two teammates and losing part of your family really affects Omega. So, and not just that, but at this point, they've lost their home. So, Omega, who already lost their home once, their new home was the ship. Now they don't have that either. So, she is processing loss upon loss upon loss, where Tech just views it as here's another obstacle. So it's interesting, but by the end of the episode, it flips for Omega because she's like, "Don't worry, we'll figure it out like we always do." Like, because there has to be a give and take there, right? So there has to be solution oriented mindset, but at the same time, you have to understand what has happened and either have sympathy, empathy, or some kind of emotion around those things that have happened. So yeah,
Yeah, I think from just a not necessarily storytelling perspective, but this is I think an important episode in the Star Wars universe as a whole, right? Because you don't really touch on. I mean, there are emotional aspects of many of the stories, right? But how certain people deal with things, right? Like, for example, people sometimes talk about the way that Luke reacts to Obi-Wan dying versus how Leia reacts or is reacting to having seen everything happen to her home planet and stuff like that, and how she's so, level, at least in the moment, whereas he's terribly broken up, right? Well, I think that in this particular episode, Tech's way of dealing with his stress is becoming snippy. And, typically he's not as short with the squad, right? He pokes them, he jeers them with his rationale, right? And stuff like that. But in this episode, he is aggressive in the way he does it. He's more snippy, right? And I think that is the weight and the emotion and the stress on him manifesting, right? And I've said it multiple times as we've covered this season that I relate to Tech on so many different levels. And I mean, there were probably 3 different ways that I related to Tech in this episode, starting first with, the snippiness and the being short with people who maybe you feel aren't doing things the way that you would expect them to, right? But more importantly, how he tries to be rational and logical with a kid who is dealing with a various set of emotions. And I am going through that really hard with Connor right now. I talk to him like he's a 14-year-old sometimes, not like he's a 4-year-old. And I over explain things textbook over-explainer here, and it does more harm than good because the kid doesn't need your logic, right? And I think Hunter kind of alludes to that, right? She doesn't need to know. She already knows what she already knows the important stuff, but she doesn't need your logic. She needs your support. And Tech doesn't know
Support
how
and
to
compassion.
right, and Tech doesn't know how to do that because he's never had to do that. There's never been a reason to do that, right? They've been soldiers, and
He's dealt with soldiers. Yeah, he's dealt with soldiers his whole life.
soldiers. I'm certainly not one myself, but I know my
Soldiers
uncle.
follow orders.
Well, so my uncle, being in the army, right? I remember the stories he told me from his second tour in Iraq, during Operation Iraqi Freedom and all that stuff, and some of the stories he told me were devastating, and the way he tells the stories is very, very low key, very no emotion, right? And it's not until after, right, that soldiers have their pain and all of their trauma and stuff like that to have to deal with, right? And so, in obviously this is fictionalized, right? But the fact that they've never had to deal with or try to process their emotions because nobody cares. Nobody cares about what the clones think. Nobody cares about how the clones feel. Nobody cares about any of that stuff. And
Yeah, we saw it 2 episodes ago.
exactly.
We know, like, nobody cares. Nobody's even thinking about them.
And it's really important at a macro level. Forget Star Wars for a second, right? It's really important at a macro level to recognize that, that obviously people deal with things in different ways. And just because someone isn't outwardly sad or angry or whatever about a certain thing doesn't mean that they're not compartmentalizing it and sort of dealing with it in their own way. And so Tech's way of dealing with things is probably much more introverted, right? Because he's more than likely much more introverted, and it's internalized, and it's not an outward show of emotion, whereas Omega's is. She's much more emotions on the sleeve, and sometimes you have a really hard time as someone like Tech, which I can honestly say that I have those issues sometimes too. I have a hard time having empathy at points, which really makes me come across as cold and whatever. But it's hard sometimes when your brain is like that, like that's how your brain processes things, to switch. And so,
Well, it's not just your brain; it's just like your experiences, right? So, I mean, I never talk about this. Well, I've talked about it with you and obviously a bunch of other people in my life, but never on the podcast. But I lost my mom at age 19, and at age 9, she was put in a situation where she was never going to be the same person she was prior to that, based on chronic illness. So, me going through that and then watching my mom, especially at the end, suffer, or not be coherent even because it wasn't her. That changed my outlook on how I process things like death or loss, period. That shifted my mindset towards a different just path. So now, even, years later, 15 years now it's been, so, but I process things way different than other people do. And it's not that it's one way is right or one way is wrong. It's just, it's a different way of processing it. And so, everyone's gone through that, especially when you just said it, like soldiers. Like, Omega's never been in those situations. Like, the Bad Batch have watched many of their brothers fall right next to them.
and they just
And I
have
know
and they
that
have
they
to
were a
carry
squad
on.
of 4 and 5 behind, but they have to carry on. Like, their goal as soldiers is to carry on. And I can relate to that mentality of, well, I have to move on. I've been through a really hard time, and but you learn to move on. And depending on when things happen in your lifetime, or how you react to emotional situations anyway, yeah, the way you react to it could be completely different than somebody else. And it's not that one way is right or wrong. It's just that you have to understand how they are processing it. And I think by the end of the episode, you see Omega realize that Tech is struggling also, just outwardly in a different way.
It's highly emotional, again, because everyone can relate to it in some respect. With you shared a personal story. Myself with what happened after my son was born. And everything we had to deal with my wife. And I don't know that she'd like me to be sharing this, but there's everything that's going on, right? You're worried about. I'm worried about my wife in the hospital, and I'm worried about my newborn son at home, and I'm trying to split my mind and deal with everything all at once, right? And so you end up just holding it in or learning how to deal with things. And, people after the fact will say, well, I don't know how you did this or that. And it's like, I didn't have a choice. You have to deal with it. Like, you just have to go, right? Like, that's,
Yeah.
there's no other option, right? And then you deal with it later, right? Or you hope to deal with it later. And there are still things that I deal with, like from a anxiety standpoint today, that were born from that moment, that experience. And so, just like you with your mom, and so this episode is very real, and yes, they do it in the framework of a kids show, right? And there's a lot to
And
be
not just that, but this was the brain break episode. Like,
right. And so, but you, and they give the whole, parent to kid relationship thing too, which I kind of already talked about. And I'm sure you'll get there with your son as he gets a little bit older, right? That trying to,
oh no, he sucks. I'm kidding. He's great, but no, it's difficult when everything he does is emotional right now. It's everything is emotionally charged. So, you said you struggle sometimes with like over explaining. Yeah, same thing, except my kid's 2. So over explaining to him is just hilarious because he just like nods his head and he just goes on.
he just glazes over, just,
Or you say, hey, don't do that because, hey, I'd rather you not run with a knife. Go figure. Or a fork. It's dangerous. Don't do that. And then he thinks it's just a game because I'm telling him not to do something, so it's a game. But yeah, just figuring out what triggers him to respond the way you want him to is hilarious sometimes because it's not always just matter of factness. It's like, ooh, look, a butterfly. Let's go talk about that. But yeah, I mean, it is very different being that parent in those relationships and Tech kind of learning like I can't just be matter of fact with this kid because one, I'm sure he realizes it too, not emotionally even, logically. She's never been through what I've been through. So like logically, she's not going to process this the same way I am. So he can get there because he's a genius, and so like he'll figure it out. But it's just interesting watching him make those connections because he did finally make the connection. Obviously, Hunter and Wrecker pushed him, but he needed the push, and he cared about losing Omega. He didn't, like you said, like he didn't really think about what was going on. He dove in after her.
yeah,
So
without
it
hesitation.
was a yeah, it's a different feeling when you care for your not just teammate but family member.
Exactly. And, I think, or I hope, I expect that this will do a lot for the back half of the season as far as, well, obviously bringing them closer, not just Tech and Omega, but the squad as a whole. Because this will be, I'm sure, something that is reviewed, certainly not on screen, right? But it will affect the squad overall and how they interact going forward. And I gotta think that aside from being a really important social commentary this episode, that there's going to be some connection or something that comes up in the future. And I swear to goodness, if it is Tech getting killed. I'm gonna riot. But something like that's probably going to happen, right, to somebody. I mean, they're so connected now, and Echo was the weak link, if you want to say that, like as far as who Omega is directly connected to, right? She's obviously connected more to Hunter and Wrecker, and now Tech. That it's like three men and a clone.
3 men and a baby.
3 men
They
and a
figured
baby.
it out. It's 3 men and a baby now. If they didn't have it before, they've got it now.
So
All you had to do was get rid of one.
so it'll be interesting to see how they or how or if they use these relationships now going forward.
Yeah. No, I think it's gonna be really good. I'm excited to see the rest of it. I know this episode probably did not get the ratings that you or I would rate it, and I made a joke earlier that it would have been a better episode if Wrecker would have got Mufasa. But I don't know if you're ready for this now or not, but like rating wise, I'd probably give it a solid 8.5, just because I know it was an off the beat episode, but at the same time, it did have a lot of emotional ties to it, and I connected with the situation as far as processing those emotions and everything else. And let's face it, them getting their ship stolen is kind of funny. We haven't really seen that a whole lot, like where you get your main mode of transportation just stolen.
Yeah.
We've seen it blown up. We've seen it commandeered or locked in an impound or whatever, but getting it just straight up stolen is a different type of pain for our team.
It was like,
and I do think they get it back. I will say, I think they get it back.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think that's going to be part of the one of the upcoming missions is to recover the Marauder. But it was a very Unkar plot moment where it's like Wrecker's running out, going, "Hey, that's mine." So
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
8.5,
much.
8.5 for you then. 8.5, you said.
Yeah. I'd give it 8.5. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like this episode, whether or not it hit with the particular viewer, will have to do with whether or not they could obviously relate to what the characters are going through. So if you couldn't, then you're going to think it's a totally pointless episode, which beyond that, it probably was. But that concept, the overall concept of how to deal with emotions, loss, etc. It's massive. So yeah, I would probably give it an 8.5. I would have given it an 8.5 because halfway through the episode, I was just nodding my head the entire time as Hunter and Wrecker were interacting with Tech, and his responses were just like, that's how I have responded to things like that. Like, I have literally said those sorts of things. Like, well, this is how I'm being truthful. I'm being honest. And they're like, honesty is not the thing here. And you're like, oh, whoops, screwed that one up. So I could totally relate to that. So yeah, 8.5 for me as well. So again, unsurprisingly, the broader IMDb fan base, which again, it just came out yesterday, so there aren't a ton of ratings yet. So there's 670 ratings. It's a 7.1. So which is actually interesting because it's rated higher than Faster and Entombed, which had more action in them, albeit again still standalone brain break bottle what Keith call it, a bottle episode, right? It's all kind of self-contained.
A bottle episode, yeah. I enjoyed Faster, so the fact that's lower is, I enjoyed this one too, to an extent, obviously, but in the bigger storyline, there is no connection right now, currently. Right.
So there are 6. We'll do the user reviews real quick. Six user reviews so far. 8. First one, 8 out of 10. Picture perfect.
Posey fan.
Patience. We will get to Posey fan. We'll start with an 8 out of 10. Picture perfect. Character development. Dave Filoni. Mastermind. Posey fan. 7 out of 10. Wait, there aren't ship keys in the Star Wars universe. How did that person steal the ship? You're telling me they just leave the
He
ramp?
hotwired it. He hotwired the whole thing.
He looked like a pirate, so pirates are really good at stealing stuff. So
he went in a side panel.
So that apparently was his biggest gripe because he said overall largely enjoyed the episode. Omega and Tech got some much needed character development. Music. Oh, we didn't even talk about the
They really
music.
did.
We didn't even talk about the music. The music in this episode was
The
fantastic.
music always sucks. I never want to talk about the music. It sucks. I hate music. I don't even know why they put it in the episode.
Like
I'm
the
kidding.
I got
Fantastic job with the music, as always.
the Western vibe, like the kind of cowboy.
Immediately.
Yes.
I heard Spurs, and I'm like, they're going to see Boba Fett. Where's he at? Where's he at?
So
He
yeah,
didn't show up.
I can't believe I forgot about the music because that was the first. Well, I mean, it's the first thing you hear. Like you don't even see the picture. You know, you don't even see the opening scene.
Which
yet.
is also kind of, it's a little weird because they're going into mines and stuff like that, but it really didn't, they didn't have to set it like that, but they did, and it worked really well. But they definitely could have done it with like an upbeat, more adventurous type music, but they didn't go with that. They went with the softer Western. I wouldn't even call it soft. It felt very Western when you got off the ship to open the episode.
Yeah, and I think that has to do with the cowboy being, it's the Lone Ranger, the lone gun, right? And how we've talked about it before, kind of going off on your own. The lone wolf doesn't. They don't do as well, right? Like you got to stick with your tribe, sort of thing. Oh wait, that was last episode.
Also, you think the music played into the fact that they were alone again, in a different way alone.
Yep, I do. I think it was just another piece.
Tonto was there. Anyway,
Yeah. So, anyways, music and animation was really good. One last thing I will say: I think the weekly release schedule is hurting the show massively. I'm not sure what that means.
well, they want to binge it.
Oh, yes.
That's all. They just want to binge it. They want to binge the whole thing. Weekly release. Some people are very much for every Wednesday I get to sit down and watch a new episode, and some people are like, I'd rather have all 16 episodes or maybe half a season now and half the season in 2 months. I want to binge the whole half.
Right.
You know.
It's like
So
that's what Stranger Things
I've
did,
seen
right?
both sides of the arguments.
Isn't that what Stranger Things
Yeah,
did?
Stranger Things did that. Other TV shows do the entire season though at once. So Disney is not known for the binging. Disney has been weekly releases for almost every fandom show. Period. It's been weekly releases.
Well, and that's because it keeps subscribers, or well, it's supposed to. I mean, we could talk about the fact that 2.4 million people dropped their Disney Plus last quarter, but that's beside the point.
Until Mando season 3 comes out.
Let's see. Got a 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10, 4 out of 10. Here we go. This will be the last one we talk about. Elite Team or Ineptly Written is the title. How many failed missions has the team conducted? How many times can you say nothing of value leads to the next episode? How many times are they, in parentheses, Omega, whining or belly aching? How many times is the dialogue filled with exposition rather than pursuant to a strong story or stories? Okay. How many times does Omega speak up for the team, making promises or choosing a path for them without the team being present? We kind of talked about that last episode. Any meaningful episode did not center on the team. Yeah, I don't know. He says, tip to the writers, ditch Omega and actually write stories that mean something. Fear of loss and consequences of action, the striving of noble goal and enemy. Yeah, I don't. Right now, the team is their own worst enemy. I don't agree with a lot of that.
I understand. I can see where they're coming from, right? So, but what I would argue is, I said it last episode, right? Like, it'd be nice to watch the Bad Batch just go on a mission and it goes smoothly because they are the elite squad. They're supposed to overcome obstacles at a fairly easy pace, which, to be honest, if you look at their missions that they have been successful in, it's been pretty quickly fixed what the problems are. Outside of the opening 2 episodes with the treasure chest, or what they call it, the war chest. Sorry, never really got a solution to that. But outside of a couple missions, really, they've completed the missions they set out to do. But it is getting a little ridiculous that just a super simple extraction turns into a super dilemma for an elite squad of troopers. So I could kind of see that, but at the same time, you can't eliminate Omega. She's going to play a bigger part in the Star Wars story somewhere. We're not there yet. We don't know what that's going to be. It's going to come at some point during this show, or unless they have bigger plans for another off spin, which that could happen. But she plays a bigger part in the Star Wars universe as far as completing the circle than we've been led on to believe yet. We've gotten tidbits, but I think there's more to say and more to do. And the Bad Batch is still playing a major role in filling some of those gaps. So I would just caution to be patient, and hopefully good things are on the horizon.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, that'll bring the episode 9 discussion to a close, and we'll pivot briefly to some news and notes that we got actually earlier today, as far as the purported reveal of the film timeline at the upcoming Star Wars Celebration. So, what do you
Hopefully my crazy face there for all of our YouTube people get that all.
like? I mean, I don't know.
We're gonna get what?
Yeah,
we're gonna get what?
We're gonna get some films apparently.
Oh, a film is coming out. Oh,
Film, you say? I'm curious.
which director? Which of the 10 directors they already announced is gonna take this one?
Because they already, they did this 2 years ago. It wasn't pre-pandemic, right? It was 2 years ago, right? And
Taika was supposed to get one. Patty Jenkins was in line for one, I think. Like
Ryan
that
Johnson
wasn't Patty Jenkins.
Ryan Johnson was
Ryan
supposed
Johnson was
to
supposed
get
to
3.
get a trilogy. The Game of Thrones guys are gonna get one. D&D,
yeah.
like going at it, like.
Yeah, I don't know. What are you expecting? Assuming that the report's accurate and that we do get something at Celebration, what do you think it's actually going to be, like, realistically?
I mean, one, I hope we get it. 2, it's gonna be. I hope it has nothing to do with the Skywalker story. I hope they go High Republic. I hope they go. They could make a Rebels movie, and I would be ecstatic. I mean, you could include Ahsoka. That would be inside the Skywalker phase, but not Skywalker based, and I would be ecstatic about that. But there's nothing really to tell for the Rebels anymore, so to speak. But that's just it. Like, they could do so many things. I just do not want episodes 13 through. 10 through 12. I skipped a whole sequel trilogy.
You skipped a whole
Don't worry about
trilogy.
it.
Not sure what to do
Yeah,
with
because
my
I don't want them to make it. I specifically do not want them to make that trilogy. I do not want to see it. I don't want it. We don't need it. It needs to branch off. Like, it cannot go there again.
Well, and that assumes it's a trilogy. I mean, they could easily just do standalone films that are part of the, and they create their own Star Wars, like MCU type thing, right? But with Star Wars, the Mando verse. I've seen
seen
that
that's just
thrown
it.
around.
Like, seeing how like successful Andor was for a lot of those fans. Like, we could easily get a more drama-filled Star Wars movie that is not driven by a lightsaber or the Force, but driven by strong characters working either with or against each other within the same conflicts. Like, whether it be Imperial officers working against each other in a drama, or a rebel faction being created. So they could go a lot of different ways. I do hope they go High Republic at this point. With everything else they've been doing with that the last 3.5 years, I think it's well deserved to put out High Republic content on the big screen. I look forward to the next installment of Star Wars. I do. I just hope they do not continue the story that they were on. I don't think it was the right pace or the right way to go.
Yeah, and the thing is, if they do choose to go into the High Republic era, I'm really hoping that they do not adapt the books to a movie. I hope that they use the books to craft kind of the realm that it exists within, but I'm really hoping that they leave the books because frankly no movie will ever live up to how well a book can be written and the dramatization and the writing of a book, right? So I really hope that they don't adapt directly anyways any of the books that they have done to direct films. I would also be perfectly fine with them going Old Republic as well, because then you could do Jedi Sith, you know, and you could do the old Jedi Sith Wars. You could pull in, you know, Mandalore like in its heyday, with you know, Tar Vizsla and all of them. And you could tie it really well into all of the other stuff that's going on, especially with what's coming up in Mando season 3 and the references to certain past things as far as Mandalore is concerned. So those are the two eras that have, well, to this point, never really been explored, certainly in the films, but even in television shows. So, and some of that stuff is, you know, it would be really cool if they brought some of it out of Legends and into canon, because that would be really easy to do and not screw up, like an existing timeline or anything like that.
And personally, I'm just more excited to see who has it, who has the name on it. You know, like, because that's gonna decide how much I'm really excited about it. Unfortunately, like, do they give it to Favreau and Filoni? Like, do they give it to the guys that have been running live action on Disney Plus? Do they give it to some, like, I mean, there's been great directors on Disney Plus, period, but like, as far as producer level people, like, who are you gonna give the ropes to? And it'll be really interesting. And I hope they choose the right time period to go after, and I hope it's, like I said, I hope it's separate from the current storyline in the movies, because it'd be great if they went back to like a Solo. It won't be Solo 2. I'm not expecting Solo 2, but it would be great if they went Crime Syndicate world. Like, I think that'd be a lot of fun. And it would give us some. You could still wheel in some franchise favorites, without compromising the story into what it should not be. So, as far as if you're telling a Crime Syndicate thing, like, you know, you can bring in some favorites without it getting to a lightsaber again.
True.
You know, and not that I don't want to see lightsabers, I don't want to misconstrue it, but if it's going to be about the Crime Syndicate, I don't need a lightsaber.
I feel like they kind of tried that with Book of Boba Fett, and to some extent that didn't do very well. Like, I feel like part of the reason they have the TV shows, and by extension the comics, is to try out different, try out different things. And the Crime Syndicate didn't really play well, didn't really hit hard.
Yeah, Boba should have been meaner. They made him too nice and understanding of people. He needed to be ruthless. You're dealing with literal gangsters. It's time to kill or be killed. Like, that's the name of the. Oh wait, he killed everybody, or Fennec did. Whatever.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So I mean, it'll be interesting if they come out with a trilogy announcement, or if it's going to be maybe 2 or 3 films that are part of a phase 1, right, of Star Wars. And again, I'm personally hoping more for the standalone, or at least the connected films, but they aren't like direct sequels to each other.
Yeah, I don't need the next movie to just pick up in the desert on Tatooine after she buried the lightsabers. I'm good not going right there.
No, stay away from Tatooine for a while, please. So it'll be interesting to see what actually comes out of Celebration. I mean, there's a lot of, we were talking before we started recording about the guest lists that have been announced. I mean, there's a lot of heavy hitters as far as the guest list that I'm really kind of jealous weren't there for Anaheim, specifically Hayden, because I would have loved to have gotten a dual thing with him and
Would have been
Ewan.
nice for Hayden.
I would have, had to sell a kidney, I think, to pay for that one. Ewan was expensive enough, but the two of them together would have been pretty pricey. But nevertheless, you've got the other thing that dropped yesterday was the final Mando trailer for season 3. The funniest clip to come out of it was Grogu spinning in a chair for 20 seconds,
Grogu.
which I did laugh at. I had a good chuckle at that because
Oh, did you chuckle at the comic relief?
I sure did at the MacGuffin. He's my favorite. He's my favorite MacGuffin. No, the thing I actually liked most was because we got a lot of same shots as we have before, right? But we get more Bo, right? We haven't seen much of Bo-Katan in the last 2 trailers, and the fact that she references the Death Watch cult as being the primary reason that their home world was destroyed, and where was Mando, right? Where was he then? And so there's going to be, I don't know if we're going to get flashbacks. I'm hoping we get some flashbacks to Death Watch and everything like that. And I think that helmet that he digs up is probably an old Death Watch. The helmet that we keep seeing in all the trailers, it's probably an old Death Watch helmet. But yeah, I mean, a lot of good stuff to get you kind of, again, if you weren't already amped up, then it probably didn't do anything for you. But the Grogu scene was funny. That was good. That was good.
It's gonna be a good season. I mean, the whole premise of the season was already exciting to see. So, getting some of those other extra scenes with Bo and just seeing, I mean, I'm excited to see her interact with Mando all year because, all season, so to speak, because it's gonna be every scene they're in together is gonna be important, and it's going to play into whether or not they're on the same side of whatever battle's coming or on opposite sides of the war. So it's going to be good. Very excited.
Definitely. Yeah. So that's kind of our news segment tonight. I should put in like a really cool like Action 5 news soundbite to just like close it, right?
Oh, please. News team assemble.
Yeah, so I don't have anything else to talk about. Do you?
Not a ton. I mean, I'm good. I mean, we could always go more into the fact that we're disappointed in some of the announcements for Star Wars Celebration that we aren't going to. But I'm not. I really would rather not because I just get sad. I am disappointed that Hayden did not go to Anaheim. That was a big miss. And listen, Andy Serkis showing up at a Star Wars convention is just phenomenal. I wonder how many Lord of the Rings items he's going to have to sign versus Star Wars items. But it's going to be fun. It'd be fun to go to, or Marvel items, I guess. I mean, literally everything he does, it's gold.
You know what's funny about that is if we were going, sir, I have a really good Gollum voice, and I would walk, and I would do the my precious. I would walk up to him and probably creep him the hell out. But I would totally go up to him and talk to him like Gollum did.
Gollum.
Oh yeah.
It would be fun
because I'm that kind of person.
I'd love to be on a fly on a wall and see how many times that happens to him, and see how many times he's impressed versus just absolutely annoyed.
Because that's what I would be like. If you don't mind.
But you do have a good one.
It's all right. It's not bad.
I think it's pretty good.
Thank you.
I think you'd be impressed.
If it wasn't, 12:30.
Hobbits.
Shire. So yeah, I'll just put a mixtape together of me talking like Gollum for 15 minutes. But yeah, I mean, you got Gwendolyn Christie, Billy D. Williams, which I know you said he was in Chicago, but that's great because I wasn't in Chicago. So, and I'm sure there's going to be at least one more round of announcements. So, if Hayden and Ewan are,
I don't know. Those are the pretty big ones.
I don't know.
Those are pretty big announcements.
They are, but I don't know, you're what is it, 2 months away, not quite 2 months away from the show, and I think they'll have one more round of announcements.
Mark Hamill and Han Solo didn't come to the 40th for anything else. So well, they went to the 40th for A New Hope. Well, no, Han Solo didn't. Harrison Ford did not, but Mark Hamill went to the 40th for A New Hope.
Right.
But
Well,
he was not at the 40th Empire.
I think people are hoping for some sequel people, specifically Daisy, since she lives in London, so it would be easier for her to just, pop over to the convention center.
So the problem is with some of those main stars from that sequel trilogy are still under signing contracts with respective agencies, so they are not allowed to do public signings like that yet. Most of their signings are send-ins still.
But you could do pictures. You could still do photo ops.
Could do, also dependent on contracts and
True.
such. But,
True.
So
yes, we're slightly jealous that we're not going to
I mean, it'd
celebration.
be fun to do.
So so with that, we're going to bring the episode to a close. I want to thank you all for listening. If you do enjoy the content, we heartfully ask that you like, subscribe, rate, review. It really does help the podcast. For fandoms outside of the Star Wars universe, be sure to check out our friends over at the Galactic Dads podcast, at Galactic Dads on all the social channels. But for us, we're going to make our jump to hyperspace. So for Jedi John, I'm Obi Sean, and until next time,
May the Force be with you.
Force.